All right, thanks everybody. Welcome to the 2018 Annual Housing and Homelessness Conference. I'm really excited to be here. It looks like everybody made it in safely. We did this conference a little bit later in the year this year. We usually do it in the beginning of October. So I was like, no snow, please no snow. So I'm glad you could all make it here. This is a really exciting time. We get to see our peers that we don't normally get to see very often. We get to learn about all the great things that you've been up to over the last year, and from experts that came in from all over the state and all over the country to talk about best practices and how we can be more effective in our mission to end homelessness. It's also the one time a year I put on my wedding suit and it still fits, so I'm really excited about that. 5 years going now. Oh, 6. Sorry, Elizabeth. So thanks everybody for coming. I'd like to actually introduce Mayor Berkowitz, the Mayor of Anchorage, Ethan Berkowitz, who's been a longtime supporter and champion of addressing housing issues and homelessness, not only in Anchorage, but in the state. He's been a strong advocate for us for many years. So I'd like to invite him up to welcome you to the city. Everybody. Thank you, sir.
His wedding suit won't fit me, so that's a good thing. I just want to begin by acknowledging that we're on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina people and thank them for welcoming us here. There's moral and fiscal challenges built into resolving homelessness, and I think those of us, and especially you, who daily work to resolve the issue of homelessness have to acknowledge the nobility of what you do, and I thank you for that on a daily basis. We also have to acknowledge that there's a cost, a social cost and a fiscal cost to homelessness. And that for too long we have tried to resolve these problems by not making the right investments in the right places. And these are not just Anchorage problems, these are statewide problems. Things that occur in the villages come to the hubs, come to the major cities. And so we have to acknowledge that the solutions that are implemented in one place ripple across all of Alaska. I would encourage you to make sure that the folks in the legislature and those aspiring to be governor remember that. Because there are success stories that are built when we find ways of working together. There are success stories that occur when we communicate better and leverage the limited resources that we have. Here in Anchorage, from last year to this, we've seen a decrease of 18% in the number of people who are on the streets and in the camps. 18%. And that happened because there was intentionality, because we replicated best practices from other jurisdictions, and because we revised them so they fit our particular needs. 18% is a great achievement, but until we get to functional zero, we have not satisfied our moral responsibility. And that's our goal. We do not just want to manage homelessness, we want to solve it. I also think it's important to recognize that there's broader context to what's occurring here in Anchorage and across Alaska. In Anchorage, when we talk about affordable housing, we bemoan the fact that we only build 1/3 of the housing stock per year that we want to build. That actually puts us ahead of where the rest of the country is. The country builds 1/6 of the housing stock that it wants to build. And though there are national implications to resolving questions of affordable housing and homelessness, one of the things that we as Alaskans know is we cannot wait for the federal government, we cannot wait for the state government to do things. We have to do things by ourselves and for ourselves. And if help does come from those other quarters, it will buoy us, but we have to take the initiative. We have to show that there is a way for us to solve these problems by ourselves. The fact that the behavioral health system in this state is so undersupported is tragic. The fact that we have the highest rates of domestic violence and sexual assault, it's tragic. But I think it's past time where we should just bemoan these statistics. and just focus on the fact that there are real people that we know, our friends, our family, our neighbors, who are impacted by the inability of the broader governments to come together and lead the coalitions that are necessary to provide the support that's necessary. In Anchorage, one of the things we've done is recognize that government alone cannot solve this. We know that the state government has underfunded behavioral health. We're taking steps to build a behavioral health system here in this jurisdiction. And it is the kind of things that we can do by ourselves because we're not waiting. And I think Juneau, as a government, has failed its moral responsibility by focusing on cutting the budget and not on serving the people. And so this upcoming legislative session, encourage people to do the right thing. Because when they cut the budget and push cost, fiscal cost and moral cost on local jurisdictions, they're not cutting the budget. They're just avoiding responsibility, and hold them accountable for that. So what can we do together? We need to communicate better together. I've found that one of the frustrations that exists is that there are a lot of tremendous agencies doing great work, but we don't communicate our success. We don't communicate our information. We don't communicate our data. And that when we do have that kind of communication, we're able to leverage the resources we have. I think part of the aspiration many of our organizations should have is to go away. That when we solve homelessness, many of the organizations that are represented in this room should go away. That should be our goal, because then we know we have done what we are supposed to do. We will have served the people the way we're supposed to serve them. The problems we have in Anchorage and in Alaska, these are deeply personal. When I've been on streets in big cities in the lower 48, they're just overwhelming with those numbers. We have about 1,300 adult homeless, 1,100 adult homeless on the streets here. More people than that get off airplanes at Ted Stevens Airport every afternoon, and all of those people find a place to stay. This is a solvable problem. The steps that we've taken, and you'll hear about them later on, include bringing people together and having a plan, making sure that there is a single agency or single agencies that are charged with focusing on solving the problem. People who get up every day focused on bringing the coalitions together, answering the questions, and making sure that we're solving homelessness. And when I first got elected a couple of years ago, I thought if we could just house one person a day, just one person a day, we could solve homelessness in Anchorage. That was 3 years ago. And at this point, we've hit that number. We do solve homelessness for about one person a day, maybe more recently. But because those numbers are growing at the same time that we're taking people off the street, we're not resolving this as quickly as we can. There's nothing as gratifying for me as mayor as when someone comes up to me and says, "Thank you. Thank you for helping save my brother or save my sister or save me." And it's not me who did it. I am very fortunate that there are tremendous people who work for the city, who work for the agencies, who do the right thing every day, who answer that higher calling. So when I welcome you here to Anchorage and ask you to find better ways of working together, find ways of communicating, find ways of leveraging the resources we have, I want you to know that there are advocates for you and with you, and that anything that we at the municipality can do to help resolve this issue in a better way, we're prepared to do. We need federal partners. We need state partners. We need nonprofit and private sector partners. And as we've found them, we have found a way to get to functional zero. When I hear what goes on in other cities across the lower 48, it's overwhelming for them. But here, because it's personal, because it's meaningful, I think we can reach a little bit deeper. We can sacrifice a little bit more of our institutional survival in order to satisfy the mission, of solving homelessness. So during the course of this conference, find ways of communicating, learn from one another, borrow liberally or even steal the plan that we've put forward here. Because if we do things the right way, the Alaska way, then we'll have set an example not just for our state, but for the rest of the country. And I know that that's part of who we are and what we are. So let's go do that. And let's, when we come back next year, be able to tout the successes that we've had and see the end when many of us can come to a conference like this and many of us won't even be here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, thanks for coming to the conference. That's all we need to say, right? Makes my job easy. So I'd like to also thank the sponsors of our conference here, the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority, and the Division of Behavioral Health have all chipped in to make this event happen. We can't do it without them. Not only just the costs of putting the conference on, but also to support travel scholarships for folks to be able to come up here. This year we were able to provide 32 travel scholarships to folks from all over the state to get here, and that's really big, especially when we're talking about nonprofits with small budgets. So thank you to them. A longtime champion of our work is Brian Butcher from the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. He is here, and I'd like to give him a moment to say hello. Should have had you sit closer, right?
Thanks, Brian. Good morning, everybody. To kind of add to a little bit about what the mayor said, and I really, at Alaska Housing, I really appreciate being able to work with mayors that have the kind of passion Ethan Berkowitz has for this. Having meetings with community leaders that understand the issue and understand the priority is a game changer. It's one less thing we have to do in terms of education on how important it is to deal with this issue. And as an example, to touch on what he also touched on, every 2 to 4 years, we have a new governor. Every 4 years, we're going to have a new governor. We have a new legislature in terms of organizations, new people in leadership, new people in charge of the finance committees. We have new legislators, and the process of educating starts all over again. And so it never ends. And it becomes, for us at AHFC, one of our key issues, because before we can work with you all, before we can do a lot of the things that we want to achieve, we need to get the funding from HUD, we need to get the tax credits from the federal government, we need to get the funding from the legislature, the governor's office. Those are all things that are yearly battles. And I really appreciate everybody in the room for all the work that you've done, because as you remember, when we were in a budget crisis 4 years ago, not that we're not now, but homeless assistance program, 0. Senior housing, 0. Special needs housing, 0. We brought it back up to the level that it had been before. And it was so many of you in the room that played such an important role of doing that, of making the legislature, the governor, understand the priority, understand the responsibility that we have to take care of the people that truly need more help than anybody else you look around in our state. When you look at some of the numbers, you see over 14,000 Alaskans went through the HMIS system in state fiscal year 2018. 30% of them were families with children. That's thousands of children going through the school districts, 5 schools, 6 schools in a year, and then they move on to middle school or they move on to high school and they just disappear. We lose track of them. About 10% are the chronically homeless, much of what the mayor was speaking to. And so each of these groups have different, we have to have different solutions. And who we talk about and how we communicate the issue needs to be specific to who we're talking to. A good example is, you've probably talked to a lot of people that when they think about homelessness, they think about somebody their age that's just not working. And you know, you hear the pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I want to pay for my rent, I go out and get a job, they need to go out and get a job. And what I've found is really effective in talking to those legislators in particular is talking about the family aspect of it and talking about the youth aspect of it. Because everybody can appreciate if there's a child that is going through numerous schools a year and then eventually just drops out because trying to simply survive is more important than being able to make it to school, that child never has a chance, never had a chance. And I would bet every single one of the policymakers you talk to wasn't in that situation. And so we're talking about children that aren't getting the opportunity that all of the people you talk to got. And that really seems to resonate with people. A few of the things that have been happening at AHFC over the last year, most of you are aware the statewide Housing Homeless Office we created earlier this year, looking to try to have a one-stop shop, phone number, website for nonprofits, other supportive housing providers, members of the public to try to get information, best practice sharing. And I'd like to let you know that in the first 6 months it was open, we had almost 10,000 unique visits to the website. So this is something we want to build on. By no means is this, do we feel like we are where we need to be with that. We want to make it better, we want to make it more responsive, but we've been pretty happy with where it's been from when we rolled it out. Governor Walker recently signed an administrative order that expanded our Alaska Council on the Homeless. Added, and what it's generally been has been a number of commissioners of departments and heads of departments that deal with homelessness, such as education, public safety, corrections, health and social services, the Mental Health Trust, Alaska Housing. I might have missed one or two, but we've added the Department of Labor. It's obvious, if we're talking about homelessness, we need to talk about jobs. That person needs to be there. We have a position for AFN. We have a position for the Alaska Coalition, very specifically, that Scott Shambor will be filling. And so we really look forward to the expansion of the council to make it even more responsive than it's been. We also have started a special purpose statewide funding round specifically for permanent supportive housing. And the round includes $8 million in construction equity, service funding, rental assistance, with a special set aside for rural communities. So this isn't something that's just going to go to the cities that probably have the largest number of people that can work to address and turn in applications for these kinds of things. Our multi-source goal round funded 160 units in 5 different communities, with 30% of the units set aside for homeless and or disabled Alaskans. The HUD 811 program has started very slowly. We were at 10 units. We've now stepped up to 40 units we've been able to fill. And so we're very happy about that. And so I told Brian I'd be brief because this afternoon at 1:15 we're going to have an Alaska Council on the Homeless, the new expanded council meeting here, and I hope many of you are able to attend, where we're going to be able to go in more detail on these programs, on what some of our other partners are doing other than Alaska Housing. So I think it'll be much information to you. But before I walk away, I want to make the point that when we went from the budget crisis we had 4 years ago to the strong support we've gotten from the governor today, there's been one person I would have to say that's been more responsible for that than anybody else, and that's Elizabeth Schultz. And Elizabeth, maybe you can stand up, and maybe we can give Elizabeth a round of applause for everything she's done for homelessness. And with that, I will hand you back the microphone. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. So I know you'll get to learn more about some of these programs in the afternoon, but tomorrow we also have a session at the end of the day that AHFC staff is going to be facilitating, which is focused all about AHFC housing programs. I get to fly around the state all the time, and I go into small villages and smaller communities that haven't necessarily been connected to those resources yet. We really wanted to have that session on the agenda this time, so that's an opportunity for you to go and learn about, hey, this might be an appropriate resource for our community. Just quick housekeeping note too, if you are a recipient of one of those 32 travel scholarships that we had and are looking for reimbursement, after we get done with our local coalition updates, we'll have Dave Rose, he's back in the back corner, he'll be at the registration table. You can bring him your receipts and get a reimbursement check written to you right away, or you can just email them to me and I'll get that mailed out to you. You may have seen an email too that we are, thank you to the Anchorage Coalition and Homelessness, we are able to have a variety of agency tours. There were a couple yesterday. Tonight at 5:30, Covenant House is having a tour. And then there's some more tomorrow as well. So feel free to jump on our website. You don't have to sign up for them. You can just show up. And we also have a couple folks that have bigger cars that they rented. So if you go down to the lobby like a half hour beforehand, we might be able to squeeze as many people as we can in. So thank you. We have a great agenda, and I've already started talking about it a little bit, but we have some wonderful lunch plenaries this year. Starting today, we're really excited about this. We have Dr. Heidi Brocious from UAA School of Social Work and Morgan Arisman, who's going to be talking about their evaluation of the Forget-Me-Not Manor in Juneau, which is a permanent supportive housing facility, and they have some fresh data right off the presses, Heidi said, and it's phenomenal to see the success of that program, and really points to, as we were saying, that we need more of this in the state. It works here in Alaska, and it works actually in many cases better than the national numbers on it. So looking forward to that. And then tomorrow, thank you to our local HUD field office for organizing a federal partner update plenary. We have folks who have flown in from Washington, D.C., representing the BIA, HUD, and a variety of folks. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but definitely tune into that. There's some really exciting stuff happening on the federal scene. And then as Brian mentioned, this afternoon, one of the options that you have of attending is the Governor's Alaska Council on the Homeless. It's an expanded council now. The governor released an administrative order at the last one to add 4 or 5 more spots. So there's a lot of great representation on there. And what's really cool about this is they hold a public comment at the beginning. So if you feel like you'd like to make a comment to the council, maybe it's something that's happening in your community, feel free to sign up for that, and they'll have a sign-in at the entrance. I wanted to mention, if this is your first time at our conference, you probably noticed that there's cameras pointing everywhere, and you're probably trying to duck around them. I think these seats actually filled up last. So we have a great relationship with 360 North. They have filmed our conference now for 3 years, I believe, 3 to 4 years. And you can actually watch those old conferences on their website or YouTube page. The link is on the bottom of this screen. But this is actually a really valuable tool. Not everybody can make it to our conferences. We try to get as many people here as we can. But I always know they re-air our conference a few times throughout the year. I always know when they do it. They don't always tell me. But I get calls saying, hey, I saw you on TV at that meeting yesterday, and talk to me about this or whatnot. So it's a really good outreach tool for us and a good resource. So also don't feel like if you're in a session where they're recording that you have to take down all these notes. You can go back and watch the videos in the future. One thing though is if you are asking a question in a session, make sure that you wait for the microphone to come around to you. Otherwise, the people on the TV won't be able to hear what you asked. So just raise your hand and we'll make sure to bring one over to you. You'll notice in your folders that there's, alongside with your agenda, there's a ballot in there. I really love the state coalition board and how they set this up. Our membership looks a little different. We don't really do membership drives. What we do is if you come to our conference, guess what? You're a member of our coalition now, so congratulations. And then we also have folks that apply for membership throughout the year. But we hold our annual election every conference. So we will be accepting ballots in our very secure cardboard ballot box, which is at the registration table. Make sure to drop those off by 10 a.m. tomorrow. And you can vote for a number of folks there. The instructions are at the top. But if you go to our website, alaskahousing-homeless.org, if you click on the conference link, there's a link for board elections. And for all the people who are applying to be on the board this year, they gave a little brief statement, and you can look at their resume, so don't feel like you have to vote right away. Do take the time and look over who's applying. We have a great, diverse group of folks who are applying this year. And due to some retirements throughout the year, we have a number of board positions open this year. So it's going to be exciting to see how those results come out. And also at this time, too, I would like to recognize our board members that are in attendance, not just the state coalition board members, but the Anchorage coalition board members. I'm not going to read off names because there's like 30 of them, but if you are a board member of either coalition, please stand up. Yes, let's give them a round of applause. These are volunteer positions, and these folks put in a lot of extra time to coordinate and plan and advocate in their own way. So I really do appreciate their hard work, and I think, as Jasmine would say, we couldn't do our jobs without our board members at all. So. Okay, accomplishments. This is usually the time that we talk about a few great things that have happened over the past year, and so I know we're kind of pressed on time, so I'm going to kind of go through these a little bit quick, but we've had a fantastic year this last year. First of all, I'd like to say before we get into this, this is the highest number of registrants we've ever had for this conference this year. I'm super excited. It grows every year. And that's a good thing, because now it seems like, I kind of gauge our attendance by how well we've been getting the word out and getting folks engaged in these work items to end homelessness and increase affordable housing. Our state coalition, really this last year, probably its main key focus was educating and advocating. And getting the word out about Alaska's unique housing and homelessness issues throughout the state, particularly in rural Alaska. We have been very vocal and consistent in our communication with our federal partners, primarily the folks at HUD and the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, and we're able to host members from the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness to a trip to Savunga this last year, which is probably a trip they'll never forget. I don't think they all knew that it was on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, but they were able to come and meet with village members there and kind of see what overcrowding actually means. The federal definition of severe overcrowding is 1.5 individuals per bedroom. And I think they learned that if you have 1.5 individuals per bedroom in some of our villages, that's actually a really good situation that you're in. And so I think they really had an eye-opening experience, and they were actually invited us to go speak at their summer council meeting in Washington, D.C. To 18 or 19 federal departments at once. It was an incredible honor, and we got to spend about a half hour talking to them about our unique issues. So this photo's from that meeting. Many thanks to the Association of Alaska Housing Authorities, Colleen Dushkin, who really helped put together a lot of the materials there, and Chris Collerock, who was not able to make it today, but he's with the Bering Straits Regional Housing Authority. He co-presented and really stole the show. He's a fantastic presenter, and he was one of our plenary speakers this last conference. So that's been amazing, and we have continued our communication in their committees to work together to try to find ways that we can address our unique issues. kind of alongside with this, the leaders up in the Bering Straits region also did a lot of work to speak with Senator Lisa Murkowski about the unique challenges there. And Lisa Murkowski, who chairs the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, chose to have the first ever hearing of that committee in Savunga as well. So this is just like a couple months after we visited. So they're probably getting tired of us up in Savunga bugging them. But that's Delbert Pengawi, who's the village president in Savunga with Lisa Murkowski, and she really put a lot out on social media about that. And what I'd like to do is play a video that Lisa made, or Senator Murkowski made for us today. She sent it in 2 YouTube links that cuts out in the middle of a sentence, so you'll have to excuse me, but here's her message.
Good morning to all of you attending the 2018 Alaska Coalition on Housing and Homelessness Conference. Earlier this year, I had an opportunity to review the 2018 Alaska Statewide Housing Assessment, and it illustrates how much work there is to be done, particularly in rural Alaska. The report states that in rural Alaska, nearly 50% of all households in some areas are experiencing overcrowding. I don't believe that statistic, because in every community that I visit, whether it's from Kotzebue or Kodiak, Quinnahock to Wasilla, I hear about the lack of affordable housing and the impact on homelessness. As I've traveled around the state the past dozen years, it seems that the biggest issue was always the high cost of energy. And it's still a subject of great discussion, but it seems that more and more the discussion is on whether or not you even have a house to heat. In the Bering Strait region, an estimated 27% of households are classified as overcrowded or severely overcrowded, more than 4.3 times statewide average and more than 8.3 times the national average. So those are statistics, but talking to folks is also a pretty great indicator in terms of what's going on. I was on a flight between Kotzebue and Nome, and I asked a mother and her daughter, pretty simple question, how many people live in your house? And they actually had to stop and think and count on their fingers. And between 12 and 14 people lived in their 2-bedroom house. Think about that. I think it's also important to point out that the overcrowding is often the expression of what is actually homelessness, with families taking in relatives or community members who otherwise could not find affordable housing options. And it's unfortunate, but not uncommon for a household in rural Alaska to have multiple generations or multiple families living in them. The stark reality is that the stock of housing is deteriorating and the development of new housing units are not keeping pace with expected population growth. And we know what happens. We know the impact on our families when we see this. We just finished up Domestic Violence Awareness Month in October, and I took the opportunity to visit several of the shelters around the state. I was out at TWC in Bethel. I was at a shelter in Valdez. These are the places that are providing safe environments for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. But even within the walls of these facilities, we're reminded of the repercussions of Alaska's lack of housing. In Bethel, I had a chance to speak with a young woman who had come to the shelter from Quinnahock. She'd just given birth to a beautiful baby girl. She had 2 other daughters. She desperately wanted to return to her home and her family. But the only place that she had to go back to was the home with the unsafe environment. And she couldn't go back. She couldn't go back because she wanted to keep her girls safe. In Valdez, we spoke about the many housing issues and needs, including how important of a step transitional housing is for families that are faced in these dire situations. And then there's other reminders. I was out in Wasilla a couple days ago, and I visited the Early Childhood Learning Center. The students that come to the center range from infants to 3 years old. 3 out of 10 are either homeless or in foster care. So think about that for a minute. Over 30% of the children who attend the center don't have a home to call their own. It's just heartbreaking. In September, I had the opportunity to bring some folks back from Washington, D.C., those that are on the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. And we brought them up to the state to host the first ever congressional field hearing in Savunga. And the focus was on overcrowded housing. The hearing included a great group of individuals. We had folks from the Housing Authority, the local clinic, the principal there in Savunga. Some may actually be with you today at your conference, but they spoke on overcrowding and the impact it's having on Alaska's indigenous population. And the
Right in the middle of the sentence.
panel painted a really clear picture of what overcrowded homes truly mean in communities like Savunga, where families sleep in shifts. The kids are awake at a certain time because there's no place to sleep. And I'm not talking about no beds in a bedroom, but no corner in a room, no corner on the floor with a pile of blankets. This was a very stark reality. And it's not just sleeping in shifts, it's the level of domestic violence that we are seeing, it's the level of disease that we see. It is an impact on all aspects of the safety of a family. There was testimony that we received also from one of the high school students. Jacob Aya shared the impact of overcrowded housing on Savunga's culture from the unique perspective of a young Alaska Native. And Jacob explained that because of the lack of available housing, his language and way of life are at risk, and that he sees more and more children being deprived of learning their language every day. He probably summed things up the best by describing how hard it is to feel that you have a future in a community if you don't have safe, sanitary, and secure housing. But with all of the hardships that Jacob explained, he still looks forward to the future with humility and hope. It was really powerful testimony. But I think we all acknowledge that everyone deserves to have a safe place to call home. I'm hopeful that the conversations you're having during this conference will take us one step closer to making that a reality for all Alaskans. I thank you for the work that you're doing to address this incredibly pressing issue. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And as always, we thank Senator Murkowski for being a continuous champion of the work here. So thank you. We've also made some real big progress in coordinated entry. Last year at our conference, you probably remember me talking quite a bit about it. The Anchorage Coalition has had their coordinated entry system in place now for 2 to 3 years or so, and are really looking at ways to continually improve service delivery. In the balance of state this last January, our coalition passed its first ever policies and procedures for a statewide coordinated entry system, which was no small task. Given our geographic challenges, lack of transportation around the state, limited resources, we really had to put together a system that's realistic and a system that's really putting a lot of changes in place at the local level, but for the better. We will now, as we are implementing city by city, have a host of unified data that we're able to share with each other and prioritize our resource delivery in ways we weren't able to before. And so I'm really excited to see the future of that as we continue on. And during that process, we really had a big win coalition to coalition. We were sort of operating on a dated release of information and data sharing model such that we weren't able to really communicate if a client's seen in Fairbanks and then arrives at a shelter in Anchorage, we weren't able to see that. So in our system itself, we had all these duplicate files for each of our clients. And that's just putting another barrier in place for us to help an individual. So through a 6-month-long conversation, we were actually able to update our release information, and we're set up to use our data in ways that we've never had available before. And so I'm really excited about the changes there. But I probably should say that I think one of the biggest wins we've had in this last year has been actually made by the Anchorage Coalition and Homelessness Board in their search for an executive director. And they found just an absolutely motivated, type A, organized leader in the community in Jasmine Kahn. And I think I'm so excited that she is here, and I'm really excited about working with her going forward. And she's going to talk about some of the Anchorage wins. So thank you, Jasmine.
Well, thanks, Brian. First, let me say, I am so honored to be here today, surrounded by people who are fighting this fight around our state for our people, particularly for our vulnerable people, and that was quite an introduction. I hope I can live up to a small piece of that. One of the tremendous and exciting developments we've had here in Anchorage is actually the establishment of a homelessness leadership council. It's a different way of thinking about bringing our executive leadership from our private sector community into the work that we do, and not only helping to educate them, but really partnering with them to look at different ways of delivering systemic services to our community, different ways of leading advocacy, and different ways of fundraising and pooling resources for our community. We are going to talk a bit more about the details around this this afternoon in the Governor's Council meeting if folks are interested, but I think truly challenging each of us in the room to look at how do we partner differently with funders, with private corporations, leadership of private entities, to really change the way that we do business or change the way that we're thinking about business. And incredibly honored to have arrived in Anchorage, well, in this role in Anchorage around the time that these events were developing. A couple other things that are happening in Anchorage that are very exciting for those of you that haven't heard about this, were the introduction, really over the course of the last 2 years, of 2 federal demonstration projects that will not only increase capacity in Anchorage to serve our vulnerable clients, but also increase our knowledge as a community. Again, always happy to talk about this offline, but first I would like to call out is a partnership between HUD, DOJ, and our local community. Particularly United Way leading the charge. We have taken on a Pay for Success initiative that by its final stages should be introducing close to 300 permanent supportive housing beds for the most vulnerable members of our community. So this would be our folks who are chronically homeless and utilizing our hospital systems and our correctional facilities as a way to try to navigate out of that, or oftentimes caught up in that cycle. The second is the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. Anchorage is one of the first communities in the nation to be awarded funding for this in its first round. We have a couple of sessions where we'll be talking more deeply about that, and we have some members of our youth task force here who will also be doing some discussion points this week. But I think what's really important, again, is that's introducing capacity for rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and permanency navigation for our young people. We're also piloting a host homes project for our LGBTQ population, and the funds were just distributed, so we're actually ramping up to start serving clients through these programs by the end of the year. So you'll hear more about this, but I think it's really exciting because these are examples of federal initiatives that, again, not only impact Anchorage, but they're demonstration projects. And if we're able to be successful in our community, we'll not only help our community members, but we have this potential to exponentially help folks in the lower 48. And I think, while I don't have it on the slide, it's important to call out that we have some grassroots initiatives that have been developing. Through partnership with the Providence Foundation, we have a community housing project that is currently in its phase where it's serving 50 families who, through rapid rehousing in a variety of ways, through a partnership between Widener Properties, Cook Inlet Housing Authority, Catholic Social Services. We also have a rapid rehousing pilot that is continuing to serve folks in the community. And when I think about those things, I also think there's a potential for national impact, if not statewide impact. So again, my folks, my staff, and board members will be around if people have questions. Moving out of Anchorage, I personally think the most exciting development has really been Brian and I teaming up and saying it is ridiculous to look at homelessness in Alaska from a statewide or an Anchorage specific perspective. We share the same folks. They're the same people who have the same needs. That the interplay, I think, is not something I need to tell you about. You all know this because you live this work. As Senator Murkowski said, overcrowding is a form of homelessness in our community. As Mayor Berkowitz shared earlier, we cannot ignore the interplay between rural Alaska and our urban hubs. And so Brian and I have a couple of things on our agenda in the next year to really focus on this One Alaska concept. Recognizing that we're independent COCs, we are not in competition with one another. So one core element, and Brian Butcher spoke about this as well, is communication. That's not only communication amongst providers around the state about clients, that's really communicating with the public. And it's not communicating at the public, but it's engaging in two-way discussion and really hearing what our community members have to say from a statewide perspective. We're also talking a lot about HMIS. We need to move to a more systemic approach to addressing our problems around homelessness statewide. And that means that we really need to be looking at the data availability that we have with our current HMIS system. We need to be pretty critical about what our statewide community needs moving into the future, and really figuring out how we can use data to not only drive client success, but provider level success, systemic success, and truly taking a chunk out of solving homelessness in our community.
And I spoke a lot about advocacy and some of the successes we've had in the past, but again, really sticking with that One Alaska theme, traditionally a lot of our advocacy has been, this is the state board's, advocacy, and this is the Anchorage board's advocacy. This is the Anchorage's data dashboard, and this is the state's data dashboard. And so, I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to work together to really solidify one message, because Jasmine is absolutely right. Our problems, we're working with the same clients. We can show that, especially when we're improving our coordinated entry system, that our clients have an amazing ability to move throughout the state. And so it's really important for us to work together to have one message. And really, in terms of the COCs, we, in terms of advocacy, we do more educating than advocating. We aren't saying, vote yes for this or vote no for that. Our role as a COC is really to put the tools in place to give to you, so you can go out and speak with your representatives about what's important in your community, and you could be armed with data. Data goes a long way in those conversations. Or if you have a question about, how does this policy impact this, we want to be a resource in partnership with our other partners to help you understand, what's at play and how different decisions may affect. So I'm really excited about those opportunities. And then also, as mentioned earlier, we have a lot of work as the Balance of State is really putting together its coordinated entry system to make sure that our system is a statewide system. Our clients don't know the fictional boundaries of our COC. They don't know that, oh my gosh, now I'm in the Anchorage municipality, now I have to fill out this form over here and get processed in this way. And so there's going to be a lot of benefit to our clients that could be assessed in one part of the state and potentially referred to another part of the state in a seamless manner. So really excited about that. We're running a little over on our time, as always. I always say I'm going to talk for like 45 minutes, and it's like an hour and a half, so sorry about that. But we are going to be transitioning into our local coalition updates in a minute. But I just want to say again, on behalf of the board, I really appreciate everybody coming to this annual event. I know it's cold out there, and I know some of you flew a long ways to get here. I hope that the agenda is what you were hoping for. We're really excited about it. Let's go ahead and take just a 3-minute break, 3 to 5 minute break, and then we'll get going with our local coalition updates. Thank you.